They handed me the wedding invitation the same day I found Gwen's old mic case in the attic, both untouched, both speaking louder than the people around me. Name's Ellery, 56, semi-retired CPA. Still wear my wife's ring on a chain. Still sip coffee that goes cold before I touch it. Ever been told your silence was too traditional for your own daughter's big day? The invitation came on a Thursday. Cream-colored cardstock, tastefully minimal, the kind you'd expect from a couple who wanted to seem like they weren't trying too hard. My name, Ellery Vaughn, was printed neatly on the envelope, no return address. The typeface serif, slightly italic, spoke of modern elegance. It smelled faintly of printer ink and lavender, maybe, from the mail carrier's bag. I slit the envelope with Gwen's old letter opener, the one with the mother-of-pearl handle she kept on the desk, next to the cookbooks. The blade snagged slightly on the fold. I pulled the card out carefully like it might bruise. Inside, Regan's name came first, bold, centered, proud. Then Trevor's just beneath, smaller. We invite you to celebrate our minimalist union on the edge of Lake Michigan with love and intention. The date was listed, the venue elegant but bare. A single RSVP line, nothing else. No mention of a father's speech. Not even a generic toast will follow. I flipped the card over looking for hidden cues. Nothing, just a soft cream backside as silent as a closed door. For a moment, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe in this minimalist format, speeches were implied. Maybe this was modern now, but then my eye caught the phrase in small font near the bottom. Ceremony will include vows and a moment of silence, and that was it. No microphone, no father's words, no toast. No voice. I set the invitation down on the oak console table. Next to it was Gwen's old photo album, still wrapped in the flannel cloth she used when dusting. I hadn't opened that album in 2 years, maybe more. But today her handwriting caught my eye on a sticky note tucked in the corner. Remember to add Regan's 6th birthday photos. The note had yellowed. The ink had bled slightly, but the loop in her R was unmistakable. Gwen's hand was always delicate but firm, like her advice. That handwriting, that album, that silence, it all pressed in around me. I walked into the kitchen and poured a cup of tea I had steeped an hour ago but never touched. The surface had cooled into a thin skin. I didn't sip it, just held the mug and let the warmth seep into my palms. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Regan without texting first. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Dad. Her voice still had that lilt from childhood, though. Thinner now, polished by corporate life. Hey, honey, got the invitation. Oh, great. Isn't it beautiful? It is, very tasteful, I said. Letting the words fall like stones in shallow water, I just noticed there wasn't a spot for, a toast or remarks, a pause. Just long enough. We're trying something different, Dad. No speeches this time. It's about shared presence, not performance. I see. I let the silence stretch. So, nothing from me? It's not like that. You'll be there, of course. You're walking me down the aisle, but not saying anything once we get there. It's not about speeches anymore, Dad. It's about moments. Moments. As if words had no weight, as if stories were outdated. I remembered a 7-year-old Regan spinning in the backyard, wearing Gwen's veil and yelling "Daddy" at my real wedding, "You'll have to practice your speech," and me laughing, promising, "I'll write it on a napkin like a real poet." Now the napkin stayed blank. I hung up before the silence turned brittle, walked back to the console, picked up the invitation again just to be sure. Still no mention, still no line, still no voice. The room smelled like old cedar, a little jasmine from the potpourri Gwen had mixed herself. Petals from her mother's funeral arrangement mixed with pine shavings and cloves. She kept it fresh until the last winter. After she passed, I just let it sit. It had dried into something between memory and dust. I opened the drawer beneath the console, found the wedding speech I had written 10 years ago when Regan was still in college. It was handwritten, 4 pages full of Gwen's stories. Regan's scraped knees, that time she refused to eat anything but purple grapes for a month. I held it in my hands like a relic, then placed it quietly back. On the mantel stood Gwen's wedding photo, sunlight on her cheek, lace veil trailing in the breeze. I placed Regan's invitation beside it. The cardstock leaned slightly forward, almost as if trying to escape the frame. "If you were here," I whispered, "what would you say?" The house gave no answer, only the faint tick of the clock above the fireplace, and outside the sound of melting snow dripping slowly off the roof. Trevor called me a cool dad at the cafe. Then he ordered oat milk lattes for all of us, no sugar, no syrup, no cream, and changed the subject before I could reply. The place was called The Grove, though I saw no trees, no green, not even a potted plant. Just polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and copper lighting fixtures that looked like someone had spent a full week choosing them to look like no one chose them. A curated playlist of lo-fi jazz purred in the background. I couldn't tell if it made the room feel smarter or just quieter. I sat across from Regan and Trevor, one hand still in my coat pocket. Outside, spring was warming Traverse City, but inside this cafe, it was all chill tones and silent stares. The barista handed over the drinks with a tattooed forearm and a nod. Trevor thanked him like they were old college buddies. Regan took a few photos of her latte-angled soft focus, then put her phone face down on the table. But the light kept flashing every few seconds. Notifications didn't wait for permission anymore. "It's good to see you, Dad," she said. "You look, well enough," I smiled. "A little grayer than last time." She looked up, smiled briefly, then checked her phone again. "We wanted to talk about the wedding tone," Trevor said, leaning forward. "We're doing something minimalist, but intentional. Think small-scale, high emotion, but nonverbal." "Nonverbal?" I asked. He chuckled. "Yeah, like immersive. The setting speaks." Regan chimed in. "We've been to so many weddings where the speeches just drag. It's hierarchical, you know. Like one person has the mic, everyone else just listens politely." I stirred my latte. The spoon clinked softly against the ceramic. I didn't lift the cup. "I always thought weddings were the one place people wanted to hear stories," I said. "When your mother and I got married, her Uncle Raymond stood up and cried through 3 napkins. It was the best part of the day." Trevor smiled like I just shared a weather report. "But storytelling's changed, right? We're doing that through environment now, light space movement. Less stage time, more flow." I nodded even though I didn't understand a word. The foam on my drink had started to sink, leaving a heart-shaped puddle in the middle. "I wrote a speech," I said quietly, "years ago for her wedding, just in case." Regan didn't look up. "That's sweet, Dad." "Really?" Trevor reached for his phone. "Speaking of which, we just finalized the lighting concept for the aisle. It'll be dusk golden tones, then subtle downlights during the vows. Very cinematic." My daughter had stopped making eye contact somewhere between hierarchical and lighting concept. She was nodding, but only at her screen. I folded my napkin carefully and placed it beside the untouched cup. "Well," I said, standing, "I'll leave you two to your vision." Dad Regan looked up finally, as if hearing something too late. "Don't go, I'll let you get back to work. It's clearly important." "Wait, it's not like we're trying to exclude." "It's fine," I smiled. "You've built something beautiful. I'll catch up with you later." I walked out before the moment could curdle. Outside, the late morning light had turned the sidewalk into a patchwork of shadow and bloom. A bus rumbled past. Someone's dog barked 3 times and then fell quiet. I didn't know where to go, so I just walked, letting my hands drift into my pockets again. That's when I saw her Lurleen Hatch standing outside the bookstore, 2 shops down. Gwen's great-aunt, though everyone just called her Miss Hatch, like she ran a boarding school from the 1930s. She wore a navy blue coat, a brooch shaped like a fountain pen, and shoes that hadn't changed style in half a century. "Ellery Vaughn," she said, as if reading my name off a roll call list. "You look like a man who's had to swallow a bitter pill with no water." I chuckled dryly. I didn't even get to read the label. She stepped closer, peering up at me with eyes still too sharp for her age. "They're young. They mistake novelty for wisdom. But it's not the mic that matters, you know." I said nothing. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a toffee, and handed it to me like it was holy. Sometimes the right words, she said softly, Don't wait for the right moment. I nodded, unable to speak. She patted my arm once, then disappeared into the bookstore. I stood there with a warm piece of candy in my palm, and Gwen's ring still snug on my finger, catching the morning light just so. I looked at the cafe window where my daughter was still inside, laughing at something on Trevor's phone. I wondered how many silences were buried under that laugh, how many versions of me she'd rewritten to make space for the man she needed now. The toffee melted slowly on my tongue, sharp and sweet at once. The VHS player sputtered alive like a voice returning from the grave. It coughed, clicked, then groaned softly, as though waking up after decades of silence. I hadn't used it since Gwen passed, maybe longer. It sat tucked behind holiday boxes and labeled bins. Halloween 03, Gwen's Recipes. Regan Dance Recital, Volner 1-6, each one a little tomb of its own. The basement smelled like dust layered over time. Not unpleasant, just aged. The kind of scent that lives in flannel and pine boxes. One dangling bulb lit the space in a soft yellow cone. Every time I shifted my weight, the floorboard above let out a tired creak. I found the tape easily. Gwen had labeled everything in her tidy slanted print, as if she'd always assumed someone else might need to find it someday. On the spine, Gwen plus L, 1991. No hearts, no flourish, just us. I slid it into the player. The machine hesitated before accepting it, then pulled it in with a hungry buzz. There was a static hum. A blue screen. Then Gwen. Her face, full and young, filled the frame. She was laughing mid-sentence, one hand reaching off camera. She turned to the guests, our friends, her cousins, a few colleagues from the school, and began to speak. No microphone, just her voice. I know everyone's ready for cake, she said, but I need one more minute. Because this man... She pointed at me, and the crowd laughed gently. This man is the reason I believe in the quiet kind of love. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Someone behind the camera cleared their throat. Ellery doesn't say much, Gwen went on. But when he does, you hold your breath. And when he doesn't, you listen harder. Because everything he does says something. And I hope our daughter gets that from him. The image shook slightly, someone shifting the camcorder, and then it cut to Regan. She was 5, maybe 6. Her cheeks flushed from sugar and running around. She stood on a chair, clapping her hands like cymbals. Daddy, she squealed. I want to marry you too someday. The room erupted in laughter. My own voice echoed softly. One day, sweetheart. But you'll find someone way better. The screen flickered as the image froze on her tiny grin. I paused the tape. I hadn't remembered that part. Gwen's toast, sure I'd replayed that in my mind on long drives and quiet evenings. But Regan's voice, so small, so unfiltered, it pierced through me like cold air on bare skin. I sat back into the old recliner we'd moved downstairs after the remodel. The cushion groaned under me. I let the silence fill the room. Only the gentle ticking of the water heater behind me kept time. Then Gwen's voice again. I'd forgotten that the pause button didn't fully silence older machines. Her words leaked through. Ellery was never loud, but I heard him louder than anyone. I rewound slightly and let the line play in full. Ellery was never loud, but I heard him louder than anyone. Every time he held my hand at the sink or left a note by my shoes or woke up early just to warm the car. He didn't need a speech, but he gave me one every day. It echoed through the space, brittle and warm at once. I let the tape play another 30 seconds. Just grainy footage of people dancing badly to End of the Road by Boyz II Men. Then I hit stop. The machine whirred backward, retreating the tape, like it too was trying to tuck the memories away. When the blue screen returned, I stared into it as if something else might appear. Something unsaid. My hands trembled slightly as I removed the cassette. It was warmer than I expected, soft with static. A single tear slid onto the plastic shell and lingered for a second before slipping down the edge. I looked around the basement. Gwen's keepsake boxes were stacked neatly. Some had string tied around them. Others still had the tags from when we moved to this house 25 years ago. They were chapters of a life she'd written with intention, and I had become the reluctant librarian. I placed the tape back in its case, but something stopped me. The microphone. A black velvet pouch sat on top of one of the boxes labeled Thanksgiving, 1994. I recognized it instantly. Gwen's old portable mic, the one she used at school plays and PTA meetings, the one she had half-jokingly said I'd have to get familiar with for Regan's wedding. I picked it up. The zipper stuck for a moment, then gave way. Inside the mic lay coiled in its own cord a tiny skeleton of ceremony. I turned it over in my hands. The plastic had faded slightly. One corner was nicked. But the red indicator light still blinked once when I pressed the side. Alive. Like Gwen's voice had been. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I couldn't put it back in the box. Instead, I carried it upstairs, resting in my palm like a fragile artifact. Outside, the night had deepened. Somewhere in the distance, I heard snow melt dripping from the eaves, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I placed the microphone gently on the hallway table beside the invitation and Gwen's photo. 3 voices, 3 moments, each one saying something the others refused to hear. I typed Regan plus graduation speech into my old email search bar. 27 results. The screen lit up with familiar timestamps. 2000, 2010, 2012, each one like a breadcrumb I didn't know I'd saved. The laptop hummed softly, its fan working harder than necessary, like an aging librarian pulling ancient volumes from the top shelf. I scrolled. One subject line stopped me cold. "You write better than I ever could, Dad." Sent April 2012. Regan had just turned 15. I clicked. "Dad, can you help me trim this?" It's for the National Honor Society thing. I want it to sound smart, but not robotic. Also, I put in that quote you like about honest work being its own reward. Is that too much? The message ended with a line break, and P.S. "You'll be in the front row, right? Don't wear that corduroy jacket." I smiled despite myself. That jacket had been Gwen's favorite. She said it made me look sturdier than I felt. Regan used to tug on the elbows when she was small, asking why it sounded like paper when I walked. I printed the email. The printer groaned, then sputtered, spitting the sheet out at an angle. The ink smudged slightly near the punctuation. I didn't mind. It made the words feel lived in. The next hour was a blur of mouse clicks and page flips. I found another email, her 18th birthday. She had been away at college, but Gwen insisted we throw a party anyway. "You never stop being 18, she'd said, just better at hiding it." Regan had sent a voice clip the morning of the event. I remember Gwen crying when she played it aloud in the kitchen. I clicked download. Static at first, then her voice. "Hi, Mom and Dad. Sorry I can't be there today, but I wanted to say, Dad, you taught me how to be still without being absent, how to speak when it counted. I think your silence taught me more than any noise ever could." There was a catch in her throat at the end. Or maybe mine now. I saved the clip to my desktop. Then I played it again and again. The cursor blinked patient and expectant. I opened a blank Word document. For a moment I just stared at it the way a priest might look at a confessional booth he hadn't entered in years. Then I typed, "This is not a toast. This is a memory." I sat back. The line looked like it had been waiting for me somewhere in the static. The office smelled faintly of ink and jasmine oil. Gwen's touch lingered even here, her gardening notes still pinned beside the tax code summaries on the corkboard. Her handwriting softer than any font. A page marked "When to Prune" peonies overlapped a W-2 checklist. On the shelf above the printer, the cracked coffee mug watched me silently, Gwen's favorite, white with a faded orange tulip. The handle had snapped 2 years ago. I'd kept it anyway, afraid to toss anything with her warmth still inside. I picked it up. The break was clean but cruel. I ran a finger along the fracture, then reached for the yellow repair tape I used for old folders. It hissed as it unrolled. I lined the handle up carefully and wrapped it once, twice, a third time, tight enough to hold loose enough not to hide the damage. It looked honest, not perfect, but held. I placed the mug on the desk beside the printed emails and a notepad where I had begun outlining thoughts, memories as statements. Not declarations, just evidence. A quiet sort of trial. I was collecting them, Regan's old texts about summer camp, her high school essays with my edits still in red, a photo of the two of us building Gwen's greenhouse in 2009. Each piece small, soft-spoken. but together they formed a mosaic of presence, the kind of speech you don't give from a stage, the kind you live. The sky outside had darkened without warning. Wind rustled the pine trees, brushing the windows with slow insistence. I checked the calendar Gwen had left pinned near the door. April 14th, no appointments, no tax deadlines, just the word breathe scribbled in Gwen's script. I printed that too, not the whole calendar, just the word, pinned it above my desk. I stood from my seat during the rehearsal dinner, cleared my throat, then felt Trevor's hand on my shoulder. It was a gentle pressure, just enough to stop me mid-breath. Not aggressive, not public, calculated. "Hey, Ellery," he said with that wine-warmed smile of his. "Maybe we save yours for Sunday?" "Brunch, yeah." There was no heat in his voice, just breeze, a redirect polite but immovable. I looked to Regan. She was seated 2 chairs down, laughing softly at something Lila, her old college roommate, was saying. Her wine glass shimmered in her hand, untouched. She didn't look at me. I held the folded speech in my right hand. 2 pages printed with care, underlined in blue where I wanted to pause. I'd practiced the pacing, timed the cadence to match the sunset. Now the paper felt suddenly heavier, its corners wilting slightly under the evening moisture. I nodded. Trevor gave me a grateful pat on the back and turned to top off someone's glass. Chardonnay all around. The sound of pouring over piano music. Someone clinked their fork against a flute of Prosecco. I sat down slowly, smoothing the speech and tucking it into the inside pocket of my jacket, like it might not wrinkle if I folded it gently enough. The patio lights overhead, white paper lanterns strung like promises, swayed slightly in the breeze. It was a beautiful scene, almost cruelly so, everything intentional, nothing allowed to falter. I glanced at the printed program again. Group toasts, time permitting, no mention of me, no line for Father's blessing. The phrase I'd seen on so many templates missing now, like a bone quietly removed. I busied myself with napkin folding. Unfold, refold, fingers precise, controlled. Across the table, Lurleen Hatch watched. She wasn't smiling. Her lips were pressed tight, her brooch gleaming like it had something to say. She tilted her head slowly like a woman watching someone sink politely into quicksand. I excused myself before dessert. The valet offered me a mint. I declined. The drive home was silent. I didn't turn on the radio. The road felt smoother than I remembered, like it too had been resurfaced for the occasion. When I got home, the porch light was still on. Gwen had always left it on, even in daylight. "It's not for us," she'd say. "It's for anyone lost on the way." I hung my jacket on the coat rack, but not before slipping the speech out. It had a soft crease now, right where Trevor's voice had interrupted it. I didn't open it again. Not yet. Instead, I walked down the hall and retrieved the microphone case from the desk drawer. Gwen's mic. I'd kept it with her things, thinking one day I'd find the right reason to bring it out again. Tonight felt close. I opened the pouch. The velvet was still soft. Inside the mic lay like it had just finished a show. I gently wiped the plastic casing with a cloth, checking for corrosion. The battery cover slid off without resistance. I inserted 2 fresh AA batteries, the kind I kept for remotes and backup clocks. The red light blinked. Alive. Again. The hum of readiness filled the room, subtle as a breath. I closed the case slowly, then paused. On the hallway table sat a folded piece of newsprint slipped under the front door, or maybe tucked in the mailbox and missed. I opened it. It was an article from the New York Times, Fathers and Daughters in Modern Ceremonies, the Quiet Voices Left Behind. Underneath the headline, in neat script, a note, "Perhaps now they'll listen." L.H. Lurleen. The weight of her glance at dinner returned. She hadn't needed words. She rarely did. I placed the article beside the speech, beside the mic, beside a photo of Regan at 5 years old, holding a sparkler like it was the torch of liberty. Everything assembled. The air in the house shifted slightly, like a decision had been made, even if no one spoke it aloud. I didn't wear a boutonniere. I wore Gwen's ring on a chain around my neck. The morning had been warm already, the kind of June heat that rises in layers, soft at first, then sticky like memories that linger too long. I had dressed early, pressing my shirt twice, running a lint roller down each sleeve, as if neatness could serve as armor. The venue was tastefully decorated white fabric panels swaying from the arch pale beige aisle runners on neatly mowed lawn. The scent of freesia and lavender drifted in from the flower arrangements flanking the chairs. Everything was curated, softened, but nothing softened the absence. I took my seat 2 rows back on the groom's side. My chair creaked slightly beneath me, just enough to remind me I was still here. The program lay folded in my palm, crisp and clinical in font and layout. No mention of me, again. When the officiant stepped forward, I felt my heart begin to race, not with nerves, but with quiet readiness. She greeted the guests with warm brevity, thanked everyone for coming, and then launched into the ceremony script. Trevor beamed as Reagan approached. She looked beautiful and slightly unsettled. The ceremony was brisk, efficient. Vows pre-written and exchanged without tremble. Rings slid on smoothly. I saw Gwen's eyes in Regan's for half a second when she looked toward the horizon instead of at Trevor. Then came the closing blessings. The officiant glanced at her notes, shifted. We invite everyone now to lift your hearts as we conclude this celebration of love. She turned toward the speaker, Bluetooth well hidden behind a peony arrangement. She fumbled slightly, searching for the button. That was my moment. I stood, slowly. My knees didn't argue, though my pulse did. I reached into my jacket pocket and clicked the switch on the wireless mic I'd synced to the venue's FM band the night before. 87.5. Clear signal. There was a low hum, then clarity. This is not a toast. I saw 3 heads turn, then 10. The officiant froze her hand midair. This is a memory. I paused, letting the wind carry the silence. I remember a girl 5 years old running through a garden party with a sparkler in one hand and a half-eaten brownie in the other, shouting that she was going to marry her daddy. Laughter. A few startled exhalations. Not because she didn't understand what weddings were, but because she understood what presents meant, what showing up looked like, what silence when full of love can sound like. I let my eyes meet Regan's. She grew up. She learned things I could never teach her. She became a woman of her own weather, and I'm proud beyond words. But I want her to know what she called old-fashioned was once Gwen's favorite word for devotion, for enduring. My voice didn't shake. It didn't swell. It simply spoke. This is not a toast. This is a footprint. From a man who walked beside his wife through 43 seasons and raised a daughter who still reminds him of spring. Trevor shifted in his seat. I saw the twitch in his jaw, but he didn't speak. Then her hand. Regan reached over and touched his wrist. A small gesture, a stop sign. She shook her head. That was all. I clicked the mic off. No grand bow, no flourish. I walked back to my chair and sat down. The program fluttered to the grass beside my foot. I didn't pick it up. Silence, then a single sniffle, then another. A woman somewhere behind me let out a breath that had waited too long. Applause didn't come right away, but it came. The video was titled, Father of the Bride Breaks Tradition with Grace. 350,000 views. Overnight. I hadn't known someone was filming. It looked like the officiant's nephew based on the shaky focus and occasional zoom into the peony arrangement. My voice came through clear, though. The wireless mic had done its job. Better than I ever expected. The clip had captions. This is not a toast. This is a memory. People shared it with comments like this made me cry at my desk. And who says dads don't feel deeply? A producer from a morning show emailed me. Twice. Subject: heartwarming story, national segment. I didn't reply. Another message: your moment deserves a platform. I deleted it. Instead, I stood in the kitchen watching the snow roll in through the back window. Gwen's yellow notepad sat where it always did, its corners curled like old bread. Her last grocery list was still there: lemons, baking soda, rosemary. The coffee maker gurgled to life. It filled the room with that low hum like a warm belly breathing. On the counter beside the bread bin was a small stack of unopened mail. Most were thin white envelopes from talk shows or local news outlets. One even came with a mug, had Modern Dad. I didn't open that one. Across the room by the frame holding our last family photo, Gwen's wedding ring now hung on the chain. I'd taken it off my neck the night before. Let it rest. Instead of answering the world, I answered the quiet. I called our financial advisor, asked him how much remained from Gwen's life insurance. He said the number softly like a librarian. I thanked him, then I made a transfer to a new account, the Gwen Fund. Scholarships for single fathers trying to finish school or work night shifts while raising toddlers. For men who understood how difficult it was to be silent and still be heard. I didn't tell Reagan, I didn't announce it. But a week later, a $25 donation showed up in the ledger. From her name, no note, no emoji, no flourish, just the amount and the name. I sat back in the kitchen chair, the same one I'd fixed with wood glue last fall. It creaked slightly under me, a familiar sound. The snow outside had thickened into hush. My voicemail notification blinked. 7 unheard. I let it blink. The yellow ribbon that once tied Gwen's herb bundles was now looped around the base of the coffee tin. I picked it up, sometimes rolled it between my fingers while I waited for toast. The house held still, as if pausing with me. Then the mailbox, I almost missed it. Tucked between flyers and a coupon for car detailing was a cream envelope. No stamp, no return address, hand-delivered. The handwriting on the front round, confident, unmistakable. I brought it inside but didn't open it right away. Set it down near the coffee near Gwen's recipe box. Let it sit like truth, warming its hands before speaking. We didn't speak when we sat. We poured tea, not wine. The tea house by the lake had barely changed in a decade. Still the faint scent of jasmine and warm cherry wood, the same subtle wind from the east-facing windows. Gwen had loved this place. She said the quiet here felt honest. Reagan had arrived first. That alone meant something. She was seated by the window, hands wrapped around a clay mug. The chair across from her was pulled out slightly, waiting, or maybe just open. I nodded and joined her. No greetings, no preamble. The table between us was small, round, and lacquered with age. I placed my own mug down. There was a whisper of ceramic on wood. Steam curled between us like a sentence unformed. She reached into her taupe brown leather scuffed corners and pulled out a cream envelope. I rewrote it, she said softly. Just one copy. I thought you should have it. She handed it over. It was the wedding invitation. Same font, same cream cardstock. But on the back, written in ink, the color of pine needles. I'm sorry, Dad. Thank you for showing up. I didn't unfold it. I didn't need to. I let the words sit open and still like her mother's favorite spring quilt, patterned but gentle. We sipped in silence. Across the room, someone adjusted their chair with care. The kettle hummed again behind the counter. The mug Regan used had a chipped edge, but it had been repaired, sealed with gold lacquer. A soft vein of light ran down the porcelain, as if the flaw had chosen to stay visible, not hidden. Gwen had once said, "Don't trust anything that looks too perfect. It hasn't lived." I set my hand on the table. It trembled slightly from the tea's warmth. Reagan reached out, slowly, no sudden movements. Her fingers, still slim, like when she used to grip crayons too tight, landed on mine. Not tightly, not performative, just there, no words. The contact lasted maybe 20 seconds, long enough to count breaths, long enough to mend something invisible. When we finished our tea, we didn't rush. I stood first, left the invitation untouched for a moment longer, before tucking it gently into my jacket. At the counter, the shopkeeper handed Regan a small white bag with dried osmanthus leaves. "Your mom's usual," she said with a wink. Regan smiled, tight but real. Outside, the lake glinted beneath a sky that finally remembered how to be blue. We walked in silence to the edge of the parking lot. A breeze lifted her scarf. "I'll call," she said. Not a question, not a promise, just a note in the air. I nodded. That evening back home, a square envelope waited in the mailbox. This one had a stamp. A real one, inked with the face of some historical figure I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal letter from the Traverse City Community Center. Subject: Annual Parenting Voices. Panel slot opening speaker, Ellery Marin. Below in handwriting unmistakable, "Use your voice. Others need it now. LH." I folded the letter, set it on the desk next to Gwen's recipe cards. The mic case sat nearby. Closed, not silent. I didn't reach for it, not yet. Sometimes holding space is louder than speaking. The tea had long cooled, but the warmth stayed in the room where silence once felt like loss. Now it felt like space held open. The gold seam on Regan's mug caught the morning light, no longer a crack to hide, but a line to remember. Turns out not all repairs are loud. Some arrive in the shape of presence, of listening, of not leaving when the script forgets your name. Sometimes a quiet voice takes years to echo back, but when it does, it steadies more than sound ever could. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? If this story touched a corner of your memory, feel free to share below or follow along for more stories like this one.